This week on Business Brief, we get the pulse of the state's healthcare workforce. Plus, we look at a Missouri grocery chain's effort to reach more Hispanic consumers. Welcome back to Business Brief, Missouri Business Alert's podcast focused on the business news and issues shaping the state. My name is Yashimika Wychuk, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Noah Grabianski. We're recording this episode on Thursday, July 31st, which is National Intern Day.
Wow, yeah, happy Intern Day. This one goes out to all those hardworking interns getting their feet in the door.
Absolutely. And while one foot is in the door, our other foot is in the news.
Is it the headline time already?
What other time would it be?
The U.S. economy grew at an annual 3% pace from April to June, bouncing back from a drop in the first quarter. However, the uncertainty around President Donald Trump's constantly shifting tariff negotiations gives some consumers and businesses pause about the current state of the economy. The gross domestic product rebounded in part due to a drop in imports. Private and federal investment fell in the quarter. Economists still worry about the impact of Trump's tariff negotiations, but the second quarter growth exceeded expectations for the period by a full percentage point.
Union Pacific announced plans Tuesday to buy Norfolk Southern in an $85 billion deal that would create the country's first transcontinental railroad owned by a single company. The deal would conjoin Union Pacific's rail network in the west with Norfolk's rail network in the east, which together include over 50,000 miles of railroad track in 43 states. If the deal is approved, the nation's two remaining major railroad companies would face pressure to merge as well. CPKC, which owns tracks in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, may also get involved. CPKC was formed by the merger of Kansas City Southern and Canadian Pacific. The Union Pacific-Norfolk Southern deal faces scrutiny from antitrust regulators, but the railroads remain hopeful it will go through.
97% of union Boeing machinists in the St. Louis area rejected the aviation and defense company's contract offer on Sunday. Union members expressed concerns over a proposal to shift to an alternative workweek schedule. This would shift the current 5-day schedule for employees to a 7-day schedule, with employees working fewer days a week for more hours a day. Union members are worried this new schedule could remove overtime opportunities. Contract negotiations resumed Thursday morning, and 96% of union members approved a strike if a new contract can't be reached by Monday.
A proposal to cut over half of the 4,600 U.S. Department of Agriculture jobs near the nation's capital has received bipartisan criticism from members of the U.S. Senate Agriculture Committee. The proposal would expand the USDA's footprint in 5 regional hubs, including Kansas City. Committee Republicans voiced concerns over the lack of notice given before the proposal was announced. Others questioned the expansion hub selections, particularly with the proposal's inclusion of Salt Lake City, Utah. Senators are now attempting to negotiate hubs in other states, including Nebraska, North Dakota, and Colorado.
St. Louis-based gas utility company Spire reached a deal this week to acquire Piedmont Natural Gas, Tennessee's largest gas utility. The $2.5 billion purchase is expected to close early next year. Piedmont, which services over 200,000 customers in the Nashville area, will be renamed to Spire, Tennessee. This deal is the latest in Spire's pattern of southern expansion since its acquisition of Alabama's largest gas company in 2014. Spire's aggressive growth strategy has more than quadrupled its value in the past 14 years.
All 8 of Missouri's metropolitan areas saw unemployment increases in June, as well as compared to a year earlier. St. Joseph had the highest unemployment rate at 4.5%, just above the national unemployment rate of 4.4%. Columbia experienced the highest monthly increase, with the unemployment rate jumping 0.7 of a point from May. Jefferson City saw the lowest unemployment rate at 3.7%. For our first story, we're taking a look at the strategy behind a new grocery store format, Save-A-Lot y Más, that opened in the St. Louis area earlier this month.
Save-A-Lot y Más. I'm guessing that's an offshoot of the supermarket chain Save-A-Lot?
It is. Save-A-Lot is a discount grocery chain based in the St. Louis area, and it debuted Save-A-Lot y Más in an attempt to reach the area's growing Hispanic population.
Interesting. What sort of growth are we seeing there?
Well, nearly a third of Missouri's Hispanic population lives in the St. Louis area. The Hispanic population in St. Louis, around the state, and across the country is projected to only get bigger from here. Latino consumer spending topped $2.5 trillion nationally in 2023, and that figure is expected to continue growing.
2.5 trillion? I'm starting to see what's driving Save-A-Lot's expansion.
Yep. Missouri Business Alert's Riley Hindle talked with Michael Wall, a marketing and entrepreneurship professor at Washington University in St. Louis, about the market factors influencing the store's opening. Here's some of that conversation.
So, starting really broadly, what marketing changes have you seen, particularly when it comes to like Hispanic populations?
I think in general, what we've seen, um, regardless of segment, is organizations, brands, whether it be a retailer, consumer packaged goods company, what have you, are really working hard to try and better resonate with these segments.
Yeah, definitely. If you're not connecting with your demographic, it's all for naught.
Yes, and what about like the demographic matters? I think that's always a really tough one. It's like, um, you know, does someone's ethnicity matter? I think in general, what we have to do as organizations is understand what are the factors that actually matter in determining what matters most and what doesn't matter. So sometimes one's gender, sometimes one's ethnicity is relevant. Other times it's not relevant. And and I think what you get there, and I'll stop, is this is oftentimes where marketing falls flat, where we saw this especially after the social justice movement, brands just trying to cater their message to specific groups without necessarily understanding why. And so you have to really make sure that you're intelligent in your decisions to make sure that they're linked to what people actually care about.
What would be the indicators a company would need to look for to ensure that this concept would be economically viable for them?
Whenever you think about an opportunity in the market, you have to make sure that you can deliver both on the demand side and the supply side. So supply side being you. And so the very first step as it relates to, an opportunity, the first question I ask is it real? Is this a real opportunity? And that is really focused on the demand side, the consumer itself. And the next two questions start to make their way to the supply side. So the next question is, can we win? And so if it's real, great. But the question is, can we win? And I think this is really getting to the root of your question. Does our brand align with this opportunity? Do the products that we sell align to this opportunity? If you're a retailer, does our retail space align to this opportunity? So that question of can we win is rooted in both the way you look today, as well as new decisions or new things you can do tomorrow.
So, going back to the authenticity thing we talked about, when companies decide, yes, we're going to pursue this, what in your mind do they have to do in order for this to succeed?
I think the most important thing is making sure that that market understanding is sound. Do we actually understand what matters most to these consumers under a specific circumstance or a set of circumstances, a permanent circumstance or a changing circumstance? So for example, textured hair, that's a permanent circumstance. My hair isn't going to change. Inflation is a changing circumstance. And so what is important to understand about markets is they're typically not static as it relates to what matters most to the segments within them, and sometimes something changes for segment A that doesn't change for segment B. And so I would say the most important thing is to, number one, ensure out of the gate your market understanding is sound. But then from there, always be listening and working to understand what changes might be occurring over time, because what's true today can change tomorrow. And if you're not privy to that information, it could hurt you either immediately or in the long term.
Well, thank you again for taking the time to talk with
Of
me.
course.
I really appreciate it.
Of course. Enjoy the rest of your day.
For our next story, we dig into the state of hospital employment in Missouri according to a recent workforce report. Missouri Business Alert reporter Juliana Mejia is here to tell us more. Juliana, thanks for joining me.
Happy to be here.
Can you tell us what the report revealed about hospital staffing?
Sure. So, the Missouri Hospital Association's annual workforce report showed improvements in employee vacancy rates statewide last year, though turnover rates remained stagnant from 2023. This comes after employee turnover rates reached an all-time high of nearly 25% in 2021, with a 17% vacancy rate statewide.
Wow, yeah. Did that have anything to do with the pandemic?
Yes, the COVID-19 pandemic caused a lot of strain on the healthcare industry, and experts said many workers were overwhelmed by the pressure. Following the start of the pandemic, more than 20,000 U.S. healthcare workers were surveyed, and almost half of those reported feelings of burnout, with about 2 in 5 feeling overworked as well. Even more, Beth Polivka, Senior Vice President and System Chief Nursing Officer for Cox Health, said there had already been a growing shortage of healthcare personnel, and the pandemic accelerated this issue.
I think there was hesitancy of those folks in the beginnings of their careers, and they're transitioning out of students of like, oh my goodness, do I want to go do that work? And that's the part that I think COVID and the pandemic added to, if you will, some of the angst.
How has that changed as we moved away from the pandemic?
Although turnover rates among all hospital employees have slowly declined since then, vacancy rates are dipping more quickly, with a roughly 10% vacancy rate among hospital workers last year. Jill Williams, the Vice President of Workforce Development at MHA, said this is an indication that efforts to fill positions at hospitals are paying off, though there is still a ways to go before staffing levels are fully stable long term.
Can't just stop there. Like you mentioned earlier, with some of the healthcare headwinds we're facing, with baby boomers going to be seeking more care, and more of our healthcare workforce will be retiring out of the workforce. We really just have to keep our foot on the gas when it comes to investing in a talent pipeline for the future.
So hospitals are still actively working to bounce back from staffing issues the pandemic caused. What have these organizations been doing to address this?
MHA and Cox Health have both been involved in educational programs to recruit workers to the industry or convince others who have left to return. These groups are also raising awareness of the variety of positions available in hospitals outside of providing direct patient care. Polivka said in a lot of ways, hospitals are like mini cities, needing to fill in positions in all areas.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. So generally, the report shows there's been improvement in terms of healthcare workforce development in the last 5 years?
You could say that. The data in this most recent report shows that Missouri hospitals are making strides in filling positions, though there is still work to be done in employee retention. We've seen ongoing shortages in specific occupations like nurse assistants and registered nurses, but the lack of workers in other hospital positions decreased statewide in 2024. Polivka said the challenges faced during and after the pandemic strengthened the workforce that experienced those times and prepared them to adapt to situations quickly.
It's learning to move forward fast in a mission-oriented way that we had during the pandemic.
Right.
We had to go quickly. We had to innovate to meet the challenges of the pandemic. And I think it's those same traits and characteristics and things we learned out of that we now take those same things and apply it to the focus of the future.
All right, so where do we go from here?
It's an upward battle. Despite the decrease in vacancy rates and stabilizing turnover rates last year, both Polivka and Williams are continually working to address issues facing healthcare workers and said there is still a lot to be done to improve conditions overall.
I guess we will see what the future holds for those in this industry as time goes on. Well, thank you, Juliana, for talking with me today. To read Juliana's story on Missouri's hospital workforce, go to MissouriBusinessAlert.com.
Now it's time for our words of the week. Yasha, what do you have?
This week, I have slowing sales.
Slowing sales of what?
Slowing sales of homes. Missouri home sales in the first half of this year were at their lowest level in more than a decade, and prices were at an all-time high.
How high were they?
The median selling price of homes for the first half of the year was $269,000, which is the most expensive median price on record. This continues the rising trend of median selling prices that's been seen since 2021.
So is this just a Missouri thing, or is the national market seeing the same numbers?
Well, in the second quarter, from April to June, Missouri's market was pretty congruent with the country's. But over the past year, there's been no change in existing national home sales and only 2% increase in median home price, compared to Missouri's 2.7%. Noah, what's your word today?
My word today is water usage.
Is there something about water exports again?
It is. Farmers and other experts say a new Missouri law that limits large-scale water exports outside of the state will benefit agriculture, industry, and municipal services.
How so?
Well, Missouri is a very water-rich state. About 38 trillion gallons of water come in through the Missouri and Mississippi rivers, and it's estimated that the state has about 500 trillion gallons of usable quality groundwater. But with the Ogallala Aquifer dangerously close to running dry, nearby states aren't so lucky.
So the demand in those states is higher while Missouri has the supply.
Exactly. Some economists say that water security is one of the most important things in ensuring Missouri's economic growth in the coming years. This law prioritizes using water within the state before exporting it to others. The new law also places a permit process on high-quantity water exports, which introduces consideration of the financial aspects of those exports.
Interesting. I wonder how water consumption within the state will be affected.
I guess we'll just have to see. But in the meantime, how about our closing thought?
Sure thing. Our closing thought today is from Michael Wald, the Washington University professor we heard from earlier. He touched on the importance of long-term thinking and adaptability when companies launch something new.
The reality is, no matter how sound you are in all of your pre-launch decisions, there's still going to be things that you learn, and you have to be ready for that and be willing to and able to make adjustments. So it's okay if it's not perfect, and it's because it's not going to be perfect.
Well, that's all for this week. M33 Project and DeWolf provided the music for this episode. For my co-host Noah Grabianski and editors Kelly DeRook and Michael Stacy, I'm Yasha Mikawaichuk.